Hello, this is lesson 104. It's called Solving Quadratic Equations by Completing the Square. All right, as a quick review, the product of a binomial, remember bi means two, so the product of a binomial square is a perfect square trinomial. So if we look at our first binomial square here, what would we get if we had the quantity x minus 5 squared? Well, remember, when we square something, we multiply it by itself. So x minus 5 times x minus 5, this means we FOIL. So we get x squared minus 5x minus 5x plus 25. If we simplify this, we're left with x squared minus 10x plus 25. This is a perfect square trinomial. Remember, tri means 3. I have 3 terms. X squared is a perfect square. X times x is x squared. 25 is a perfect square. 5 times 5 is 25. So we went from a binomial square to a perfect square trinomial. The same thing would happen with x plus 2 squared. We would do x plus 2 times x plus 2. When we FOIL that, we get x squared plus 2x plus 2x plus 4. If we simplify, we're left with x squared plus 4x plus 4. X squared is a perfect square, and 4 is a perfect square. So again, we have a perfect square trinomial. All right, so this lesson is all about completing the square. So to complete the square of x squared plus bx, we are going to add b divided by 2 squared. So if you'll remember, standard form for quadratics is ax squared plus bx plus c. So when I say b over 2 squared, I'm looking at whatever coefficient is in front of the x. All right, so if we look over here, we have x squared plus bx, and then we're trying to fill in that blank there to complete the square. So how are we going to do that? We're going to use b over 2, and we're going to square it, okay? Another way to write that is down here, b squared over 2 squared. And then we could factor that whole thing and get us back to x plus whatever number we get squared. So let's look at the example on the right. I have x squared plus 6x plus something. So I want to complete the square. All right, so what is the b value of this quadratic? Well, it would be 6. So I'm going to have x squared plus 6x plus b, which is 6 over 2 squared. All right, that's x squared plus 6x plus 6 squared over 2 squared. 6 squared is 36. 2 squared is 4. 36 divided by 4 is 9, right? So my final answer here, I would get x squared plus 6x plus 9. And this is a perfect square trinomial, right? How do I make x squared? That's x times x. How do I make 9? 3 times 3. So if I were to write this as a binomial square, it would be x plus 3 squared, because when I FOIL this, I would get my perfect square trinomial. All right, you might be wondering why up here we didn't just do, oops, not right there, sorry, one higher. Right up here, 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 3 squared is 9, right? That works too. Whatever way works best for you, feel free to do it that way. All right, so you might see a question that says complete the square, and it will give you x squared minus 12x. And so your job is to figure out what I would have in this next blank. Because remember, quadratics go standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c. So basically what you're trying to do is find the c value. What would it be? So if you'll think back, I need to do b over 2 squared. What is my b value? Well, for this question, it is negative 12. So I'm going to do negative 12 divided by 2 squared. What is negative 12 divided by 2? Negative 6, and negative 6 squared is 36. So to complete the square, I would have x squared minus 12x plus 36. That's the value I got here. I'm just putting it in for my c value in my quadratic. All right, remember, whatever you do to one side of an equation, you must do to the other side. So you might see a question that says solve by completing the square. All right, so if I look at the left-hand side of my equation, I have part of my quadratic, right? I have the ax squared plus bx, but I need to get that c value. So how do I find that c value? Remember, it's b over 2 squared. What is b? It is 12, and 12 divided by 2 squared is 6 squared, which is 36. So I had originally x squared plus 12x, and now I'm going to complete the square. So I'm going to be adding 36 to both sides, so plus 36. Whatever I do to one side of the equation, I have to do to the other side of the equation. So now I'm going to solve. All right, how am I going to do that? Let's simplify. X squared plus 12x plus 36 equals 49. All right, the cool thing about when they tell you to use the completing the square method is that you know that the quadratic side of your equation can be factored. So this is a perfect square and this is a perfect square. So to factor this side, it would be x plus 6 squared, and that is equal to 49. All right, so my goal up here was to solve, right? So I have to solve for x. So how do I undo a square? I'm going to take the square root of both sides, right? What is the square root of x plus 6 squared? Well, that would just be plain old x plus 6. What's the square root of 49? Remember, there can be two answers. It's either positive 7 or negative 7. So now I have to finish figuring out my solution. So I have, these are quadratics, right? There's an x squared, so I'm always going to have two solutions. So x plus 6 can equal positive 7, or x plus 6 can equal negative 7. So I'm going to solve for x, subtract 6, so I get x equals 1, subtract 6, and I get x equals negative 13. So I have two answers here. All right, let's try B. You can always pause the video and try it by yourself and see if you did it right. So first I need to find my c value. So I have b over 2 squared, which is negative 16 over 2 squared. Negative 8 squared is 64. All right, so I'm going to add 64 to both sides. X squared minus 16x plus 64 equals 36 plus 64. All right, I have x squared minus 16x plus 64 equals 100. Okay, this is a perfect square trinomial. X squared is a perfect square. 64 is a perfect square. So if I were to factor that, I would get x plus 8 squared equals 100. Oh, actually, it would be x minus 8. How did I know it was minus? I need this negative 16 here. And negative 8 plus negative 8, when I FOIL this out right here, would get me to negative 16. All right, so now I need to solve. How do I undo a square? I take the square root of both sides. The square root of x minus 8 squared is just x minus 8. The square root of 100 is plus or minus 10. So x minus 8 can equal positive 10. X minus 8 can equal negative 10. Add 8 to both sides, so x is 18. Add 8 to both sides, x is negative 2. So again, two answers here because it is a quadratic. All right, this method of completing the square only works if the coefficient of the quadratic term is 1. So remember, the quadratic term is x squared. So it only works if it's 1x squared. All right, we can divide each term by the coefficient a if needed. Remember, standard form of a quadratic, ax squared plus bx plus c. We want this a to be 1. So if it's not 1, we can divide each term in our quadratic by the coefficient a. So if we look at an example here, I have 3x squared plus 12x equals 42. So 3 happens to go into all of these numbers. So what I'm going to start with is dividing every term by 3. And so I get x squared plus 4x equals 14. All right, so now I have to complete the square. So I want to figure out my c value. Remember, that's b over 2 squared. So 4 over 2 squared is 2 squared, which is 4. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. 14 plus 4. So I get x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 18. This is a perfect square. This is a perfect square. So x plus 2 squared equals 18. How do I solve for x? I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So x plus 2 equals, this is where it gets a little weird because 18 is not a perfect square, right? So I have to first simplify the square root of 18. Well, 18 is 9 and 2, and 9 is 3 and 3. So the square root of 18 is really like the square root of 2 times 3 times 3. Here's my pair, right? So square root 2 times square root 9. Square root 2 can't be simplified. Square root of 9 is 3. So to rewrite this as 3 square roots of 2. All right, so x plus 2 is equal to plus or minus 3 square root 2. All right, I'm going to switch over here so I have more room. So x plus 2 can equal positive 3 square root 2. X plus 2 can equal negative 3 square root 2. All right, how do I solve for x? Subtract 2 from both sides, right? This is where it gets a little ugly. All right, so these cancel, right? So I'm left with x equals, and now because I'm going to leave my answer exact, you could also do this on a calculator, and it would actually probably make your life a lot easier. I have negative 2, and I'm adding 3 square roots of 2. Do you see where that came from? Here's the negative 2, and this is positive 3 square root of 2. All right. On the other one, I have x equals negative 2, and I'm subtracting 3 square roots of 2. So the way your book would probably label your answer would be x equals negative 2 plus or minus 3 square root 2. Right? They both have a negative 2. This one has plus 3 square roots of 2, and this one has minus 3 square roots of 2. You could also figure out the answer on your calculator. So you could have x equals negative 6.243 or x equals positive 2.243. Right? Any of these are the same. This is leaving your answer exact, and the bottom two are approximations of your answer. All right, let's try another one here. Again, I need to make sure my a value is 1. So I'm going to divide all of these by 5. And so I get x squared minus 8x equals negative 17. So complete the square. B over 2 squared. Negative 8 over 2 squared is negative 4 squared, which is positive 16. So I'm going to add 16 to both sides. Negative 17 plus 16. All right, x squared minus 8x plus 16 equals negative 1. How do I undo I got to factor first, sorry. Perfect square, perfect square. I need a negative b value, so I'm going to have x minus 4 squared equals negative 1. How do I undo a square? Take the square root of both sides. So x minus 4 equals, I have a problem. Here I have the square root of a negative number. Can I have a number times itself equaling a negative number? No. So this one is actually no solution. So you can do a 0 with a line through it to show no solution. So last example here, the length of a rectangle is 8 inches more than its width. The total area of the rectangle is 384 inches squared. What are the dimensions of the rectangle? So first we have to figure out our variables here. So if I say that x is equal to my width, then my length, it says the length is 8 inches more than its width. So the width plus 8 inches equals the length. All right, think about how you find area of a rectangle. Area is length times width. So if my length is x plus 8 and my width is plain old x, can I multiply those out? Sure I can, right? If I distribute my x, I get x squared plus 8x, right? I already know my area is 384 inches squared. They told me that, okay? When you see an x squared plus an x, then you should be thinking, oh, can I complete the square here? So this is just a reverse order of everything we've been seeing, right? My quadratic comes on the left-hand side of the equation, but that is okay. So complete the square. I need b over 2 squared. So b is 8. 8 divided by 2 squared is 4 squared, which is 16. So I'm going to add 16 to both sides. Add 16 over here. So I get 400 equals x squared plus 8x plus 16. Perfect square, perfect square. So 400 equals x plus 4 squared. How do I undo a square? Take the square root of both sides. So plus or minus 20 equals x plus 4. All right, so I would have, I'm going to move over here, x plus 4 equals 20. X plus 4 equals negative 20. Subtract 4, so x is 16. Subtract 4, and x is negative 24. All right, we are talking about the length of a rectangle. Can we have a negative side length? Nope. So I know that 16 is the only reasonable answer here. So the question asks, what are the dimensions of the rectangle? So I know my width is 16 inches, and I know my length is 16 plus 8, which is 24 inches. So that would be my final answer there. All right, if you would like some more practice, check out lesson practice on page 702 in your textbook. Please let me know if you need any help or have any questions. Thank you.